CBS News has learned that the president's eldest son, Donald Trump Jr., has tested positive for COVID-19. According to a spokesman, Trump Jr. tested positive at the start of the week. He's currently asymptomatic and quarantining at his cabin, the location of which is unknown. In addition, CBS News has confirmed 4 White House aides have also recently tested positive for coronavirus. Meanwhile, at the White House Friday, President Trump made his 4th public appearance since Election Day. He held a news conference to discuss his administration's efforts to reduce the price of prescription drugs. The president did not take questions about his unproven claims of widespread voter fraud or his campaign's ongoing efforts to overturn the results of the election. CBS News White House correspondent Paula Reid has the latest.
In his first remarks in a week, President Trump continued to contest the election's already settled outcome.
I won, by the way, but, we'll find that out. Almost 74 million votes.
He did not win, and while announcing a new prescription drug policy, appeared to admit the Biden administration is imminent.
I hope they have the courage to keep it.
Later, he welcomed Michigan state lawmakers to the White House, hoping they can help him win a state he lost, even though they have both already said they will not attempt to overturn the popular vote. Even so, Michigan's 16 electoral votes wouldn't be enough to change the national outcome.
Shame on you!
Michigan State Majority Leader Mike Shirkey was mobbed by protesters as he traveled to Washington today.
It's an attempt to subvert our democracy and undermine the will of Michigan voters.
The political pressure campaign comes a day after the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, held a bizarre press conference about the unsuccessful battle to overturn the election. But cracks are emerging in the Republican Party. Utah Senator Mitt Romney wrote it was difficult to imagine a worse, more undemocratic action by a sitting president.
Yesterday's press conference was certainly about as low as you can go.
Today, Georgia certified its election results, showing Biden narrowly beating the president.
I live by the motto that numbers don't lie.
Certification came as Vice President Mike Pence campaigned for 2 Georgia Republican senators facing January runoffs that will decide control of the U.S. Senate.
We're going to keep fighting until every legal vote is counted.
President-elect Joe Biden met with top congressional Democrats on Friday. He urged them to move forward with billions of dollars in federal coronavirus relief. But on Capitol Hill, other Democrats are fuming over a refusal by the Trump administration to start the transition process. Now, some say that they're taking action. CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe has the latest.
On his 78th birthday, President-elect Biden met today with 2 Democratic congressional leaders he'll partner with next year.
In my Oval Office, you're me casa, you casa.
But there is growing frustration inside his transition team as the Trump administration continues to block access to federal agencies and resources.
But I just think it's totally irresponsible.
Now, top House Democrats are demanding the head of the General Services Administration, Emily Murphy, brief them by Monday on why she hasn't declared Mr. Biden the winner and allowed the transition to begin. They wrote that her actions are having grave effects, including undermining the orderly transfer of power.
Delays or issues with the transition could cost lives in the form of pandemic. They could make us less prepared to respond to natural disasters. It could delay distribution of vaccines. That's why this is dangerous.
Tennessee Republican Senator Lamar Alexander broke with many of his colleagues today and urged the White House to provide the Biden team all access necessary so that both sides are ready on day one. For now, Mr. Biden is counting on Democrats to act before he gets into office, specifically on legislation to address the pandemic.
There's just one big obstacle in the way. In the Senate, it's Mitch McConnell, but the other obstacle, and that's President Trump.
And we are lucky enough to have Paula Reid and Ed O'Keefe join me now. Paula, we've learned that Donald Trump Jr. has tested positive for COVID-19. What more can you tell us?
Well, that news came just hours after Rudy Giuliani's son, Andrew, announced that he has tested positive. That's especially significant because he is a special assistant to President Trump here at the White House. And yesterday, Andrew attended his father's very crowded press conference at the RNC. But so far, his father, Rudy, says that he has tested negative, along with another campaign attorney, Jenna Ellis. We've also learned, though, that there are 4 other White House aides who have the virus. So this is sparking new concerns about yet another outbreak, another cluster here at the White House.
Yeah, it seems like the second wave at the White House. Paula, President Trump also met with Michigan's top Republican lawmakers on Friday. We've now learned that he plans to invite Republican state legislators from Pennsylvania to the White House. What is the president hoping to achieve, and could this backfire?
Well, Lana, as we've seen in the courts so far, the Trump campaign has really not been notching many wins. Judges are looking at these allegations of widespread voter fraud and dismissing them, rejecting them, saying, look, this is just not supported by evidence. At this point, sources on the campaign, they tell us that, look, there's no way to litigate our way to 270 electoral votes. So you see a shift from this legal campaign to more of a campaign of political pressure. These two lawmakers came here to meet with the president today. Following their meeting, they released a statement, though. They say that, look, they've seen no information that would change the outcome of the election in their state. They also said that they believe that this process should be free from any kind of threats or intimidation. Now, while the White House says that this is just a routine meeting and the president meets with lawmakers all the time, it's clear that the president's long-term goal here is to try to pressure Republicans in these big states to try to do anything they can to overturn the results. But, for example, in Michigan, even though 16 electoral votes, that's not going to change the national math for President Trump.
All right, Ed, you heard Paula say that the White House is claiming that this is just a routine meeting. But what's been the reaction from Democrats and President-elect Joe Biden?
They continue to shake their heads at all this, Lana, believing that the election's over, that the president-elect is just that, and that he will take office on January 20th, and that as long as Republicans more broadly stand by the current president and the legal and other efforts that he's trying to make to hold on to power, the longer it's just going to look really bad for them in the long run. At this point, what is happening is there's a growing level of frustration, not only in the Biden transition team, but across the Democratic Party about the fact that the Trump administration is still blocking the Biden team from getting access to federal agencies to start coordinating things like the response to the pandemic, the distribution of vaccine, and all sorts of unknown national security issues as well. There were separate briefings today from the president-elect's campaign attorney, Bob Bauer, and his transition team, both expressing alarm, concern, bewilderment about the fact that Republicans are still holding off. But the transition team points out, and this is true, that there seems to be a growing recognition, not only among Democrats, but corporate leaders and a growing number of Republicans, that it's time for the Trump White House to open up the gates to the federal government and allow the Biden folks to come in.
Well, on that note, Ed, I want to turn back to something that you mentioned in your piece. Several House committee chairs have demanded that GSA Administrator Emily Murphy brief them on her refusal to start the official transition process. They're also weighing a public hearing on the matter. Do members of Congress feel that they can pressure Murphy into acting?
I think more than anything, this is what Congress can do. They can ask for information, and if they don't get enough of it, they can call a hearing. Emily Murphy, who runs this agency that is mostly responsible for federal real estate, federal contracting, has been a target of congressional Democrats ever since she essentially paved the way for the Trump Hotel to open, or oversaw that process as it continued after he became president, and then also was involved in the situation down the street with the FBI headquarters. They were originally going to move that agency out of downtown Washington and sell the space there. There was a belief that the president himself got involved, concerned about a possible other hotel being built down the street, and she was involved in this. So for years, she's been a target of congressional Democrats. We'll see whether she responds by Monday, beyond the statements that she's already issued, that she believes that she's not yet in a position to ascertain the victory. But we'll see also whether Congress tries to do anything in terms of not only dragging her in, but potentially asking for more documents or doing something with the agency's funding. It was the Oversight Committee, which has broad subpoena power over the entire federal government, and the Appropriations Committee, which controls the purse strings, that asked for the information. She has until Monday to respond.
That is quite the backstory, Ed. Paula, you heard Ed talking about Murphy still holding off. It all seems to tie back, and she's relying really on the Trump campaign's legal challenges, which seek to overturn the results of the election in several key states. You mentioned that even if he was successful in overturning some of, or in prevailing in some of these lawsuits, none of them should actually overturn the results of the election. So where do things currently stand on that front?
Well, so far in court, the campaign has not been successful in its goal of trying to get the president to 270 electoral votes. But what was so interesting is there was another success yesterday. The president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, held what can fairly be described as an absolutely bizarre press conference. He was trying to lay out and make his arguments about evidence, alleged evidence of voter fraud. But it was that press conference was such a debacle that it did actually start to encourage some Republicans to come forward to criticize this overall effort, because while many Republicans are reluctant to directly contradict or criticize President Trump or his right to pursue his legal options, Rudy Giuliani, and particularly his performance in this press conference, was an easy target. And you saw Senator Mitt Romney come out. You also saw former Trump National Security Advisor John Bolton all sort of using that press conference as a way to criticize this overall effort that appears, even if they say it's just exercising the president's legal options, it's also undermining confidence in democracy.
Well, Ed, President-elect Biden is continuing to move forward. He met with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer on Friday. Vice President-elect Kamala Harris was also at the meeting. Do you know anything more about what they discussed, and what legislative issues do you expect that we will see the new Biden administration focusing on during their first 100 days in office?
They're trying to figure out what exactly Congress might be able to do before Mr. Biden takes office about not only the pandemic and distribution of the vaccine and some sense of how to help make that happen more quickly, but more importantly, perhaps, the economic relief that so many Americans are desperately seeking. In the coming weeks, you got unemployment benefits, rental assistance, eviction moratoriums, student loan debt relief, and a host of other aid that's been distributed to Americans in need set to expire. And as of now, there is no plan for lawmakers to renew any of that relief, which is why Biden is trying to figure out with Pelosi and Senator Schumer, what, if anything, can they try to do to jumpstart this, maybe get some kind of short-term relief package passed before the holidays and Congress essentially shuts down for 2020. And if not, he's got to figure out, well, once I take office in January, what do we need to do to pass something either more comprehensive or something that can pass a divided Congress if Republicans still control the Senate and Chuck Schumer is still not majority leader.
Absolutely. Whether Chuck Schumer becomes majority leader or remains minority leader is going to have a huge implication on that legislative agenda. All right, Paula, last question for you. President Trump held a news conference Friday to discuss his administration's policies on lowering prescription drug prices. He didn't take questions. It's also one of the few times, though, that we've seen him since the election. Why is he focusing on this issue now?
That's right. This was his first public event in a week, and during this press conference, where he didn't take questions, so I guess it's not a press conference, he announced these measures that would technically reduce drug prices for many Americans. But really, it was an opportunity for him to come out and at least appear to be governing, because there are a lot of questions about what he's doing all day. His public schedule does not have many events. Most of his tweets are about things he sees on TV and this overall effort to contest the election. So there are questions about whether he's still getting anything done. This was an ability to come out and sort of hold a photo opportunity to make it seem like they are getting things done, even though a lot of the regulations that he talked about today are things that the administration has previously announced. As you noted, he did not take questions, though. Now, this event, interestingly, it was moved into the briefing room. It was supposed to be in the Roosevelt Room, which would be a little bit crowded, but we would have had pool reporters in there. In the briefing room, he could even choose one or two friendly reporters to call on, but he decided to walk off the stage, just like we saw yesterday with the task force briefing, refusing to answer any questions from reporters.
Yes, quite a pattern, but I know you're going to stay on top of it. Paula Reid, Ed O'Keefe, thank you both.